Some stories begin with a single heartbeat and end with two beating as one. This is the story of how a brilliant surgeon who had forgotten how
Let's
to
take
feel
a closer look
learned
at
that
your
the heart
health today.
he needed to heal most was his own. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and fading roses. Olivia Bennett sat beside her father's empty bed, her fingers tracing the edge of his stethoscope, the one he'd promised to pass down when she graduated medical school. Dr. Robert Bennett had been more than a physician. He'd been a healer of souls, a man who believed medicine was as much about compassion as it was about science. Now he was gone, and Olivia felt like a ship without an anchor, drifting in an ocean of uncertainty. At 24, she should have been preparing for her final exams, not planning a funeral. The medical degree she'd worked so hard for suddenly felt impossible. Her father's salary had funded everything: tuition, textbooks, the small apartment near campus. Without him, she had nothing but debt and dreams that seemed to crumble like ash. Between her fingers, the lawyer's office 3 days later was all mahogany wood and leather chairs that creaked with the weight of secrets. Mrs. Helena Cross, her father's attorney, sat across from Olivia with an expression that mixed sympathy with something else, something that made Olivia's stomach twist with apprehension. "Your father was a careful man," Mrs. Cross began, adjusting her reading glasses. "He wanted to ensure you were protected." Olivia nodded, expecting to hear about a small insurance policy, perhaps a scholarship fund. What she heard instead made the world tilt sideways. The inheritance, including the house, your medical school fund, and his savings, will be released to you under one condition. Mrs. Cross paused, and Olivia could see the discomfort in her eyes. "You must enter into a legal marriage with a man of good standing and professional reputation before your 25th birthday, which is in 4 months." The words hung in the air like a diagnosis of terminal illness. "That's impossible," Olivia whispered. "Why would he do that?" "He was worried about leaving you alone in the world," Mrs. Cross explained gently. "He wanted you to have security, partnership, someone to support you through the challenges ahead." Olivia felt anger rising in her chest, hot and unfamiliar. Her father, who had always championed her independence, had tied her future to a marriage requirement. It felt like betrayal. "No, there's more," Mrs. Cross continued, sliding a folder across the desk. "Your father suggested a specific candidate, Dr. Julian Ashford." The name alone commanded respect in medical circles. Dr. Julian Ashford was a legend, a cardiac surgeon whose precision was matched only by his reputation for emotional detachment. Olivia had seen him once at a medical conference, a tall figure in an immaculate suit, speaking about revolutionary surgical techniques with the passion of a man discussing tax returns. He was brilliant, wealthy, and according to every rumor she'd heard, completely incapable of human warmth. "He's already agreed to meet with you," Mrs. Cross said quietly. 2 days later, Olivia found herself in the lobby of Ashford Medical Institute, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the sky. Her hands trembled as she rode the elevator to the 23rd floor, where Dr. Julian Ashford's private office overlooked the entire city. The man who greeted her was even more imposing in person. Julian Ashford stood at least 6 feet tall, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore his authority like a second skin, every movement controlled, every word measured. But it was his eyes that captured her, intelligent and assessing, as if he could diagnose her entire life story with a single glance. "He's Bennett," he said, his voice deep and unexpectedly smooth. "Please, sit." The office was as cold as its owner, all modern furniture and abstract art, nothing personal, nothing warm. Olivia perched on the edge of a leather chair, feeling like a patient awaiting bad news. "I assume Mrs. Cross explained the situation," Julian said, settling behind his desk with the ease of a king on his throne. "She did." Olivia forced herself to meet his gaze. "I still don't understand why you'd agree to this." Something flickered in his expression, too quick to identify. "Your father saved my life once, years ago. I owe him a debt that requires marrying a stranger, a debt that requires ensuring his daughter can complete her medical training without financial burden." Julian's fingers steepled beneath his chin. This would be a legal arrangement, nothing more. You would live in my home, complete your studies, and in exchange, I fulfill my obligation to your father. We reassess. His tone suggested this was a clinical trial, not a marriage. I'm offering you a solution, Miss Bennett. Your alternative is to abandon your medical career or drown in debt trying to finish it. Olivia hated that he was right. She hated the cool logic in his voice, the way he reduced her entire future to a problem with a neat solution. But most of all, she hated that a small part of her was curious about the man behind the mask, the one who would marry a stranger to repay a debt. I need time to think, she said. Standing, Julian rose as well, and for a moment, they stood across from each other, two people about to make a decision that would change everything. You have 48 hours, he said. After that, I'll assume your answer is no. As Olivia left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just met the most complicated puzzle she'd ever encounter. Dr. Julian Ashford was a man who had learned to live without feeling, a surgeon who could repair any heart except his own. What she didn't know was that, in exactly 47 hours, she would walk back through his door and say yes, setting in motion a journey that would teach them both that the strongest hearts are the ones brave enough to break. The wedding ceremony lasted exactly 12 minutes. Olivia knew because she'd counted every second, watching the clock on the registry office wall as if measuring the moments until her old life disappeared completely. Julian stood beside her in a charcoal suit, its expression unreadable as he spoke his vows with the same clinical precision he likely used when discussing surgical procedures. When it was done, they were husband and wife-in-law, but strangers in every way that mattered. Julian's penthouse was a revelation in minimalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, but the space felt more like an architectural photograph than a home. Everything was white, gray, or chrome. There were no family photos, no mementos, no evidence that a human being actually lived there. It was beautiful in the way a museum was beautiful, perfect, untouchable, and profoundly lonely. Your room is down this hall, Julian said, gesturing to the left wing. I've arranged for your belongings to be moved from your apartment. Nina, my housekeeper, will help you settle in. Nina appeared as if summoned. A woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a warm smile that seemed out of place in the sterile environment. Welcome, dear, she said, taking Olivia's hand. It'll be nice to have some life in this place. Julian's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. I have rounds at the hospital. I'll be back late. Just like that, he was gone, leaving Olivia standing in the middle of her new life. Wondering what she'd agreed to? The first week was an exercise in careful distance. Julian left before dawn and returned after dark. They passed each other like ships in the night, exchanging polite nods and necessary information. Breakfast was served at 7. Dinner at 8. The thermostat was set to exactly 70 degrees. Every aspect of his life ran like clockwork, efficient and emotionless. But Olivia wasn't built for such rigid order. On the 8th day, she woke early and found her way to the kitchen, determined to bring some warmth into the cold perfection. Nina found her there, flour dusting her nose as she attempted to recreate her father's pancake recipe. He won't like this, Nina warned, but she was smiling. Dr. Ashford has his routines. Then maybe it's time for new routines, Olivia replied, flipping a pancake with more confidence than she felt. When Julian emerged at precisely 7:15, he stopped in the doorway. The kitchen smelled of vanilla and cinnamon. And Olivia stood at the stove in jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. For the first time since their wedding, she saw a genuine surprise cross his face. I made breakfast, she said simply. I hope that's okay. Julian approached slowly, as if she might startle and disappear. You didn't have to, But I wanted to. She set a plate in front of him. My father used to say that sharing food is the first step to sharing life. Something shifted in Julian's expression, a crack in the careful mask he wore. He sat down and took a bite, and Olivia could have sworn she saw the hint of a smile. It's good, he said quietly. Thank you. It was a small moment, but it felt like a victory. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Olivia had spent the day at the medical library, studying for her cardiology exam when Nina called in a panic. Dr. Ashford had called from the hospital. There had been complications during a surgery, a young patient who'd crashed on the table. He'd saved the girl's life. But Nina could hear the strain in his voice. Olivia found him that evening on the penthouse balcony, still in his surgical scrubs, staring out at the city lights with an expression of such profound exhaustion that her heart ached. She'd never seen him look so human, so vulnerable. "Julian," she said softly, stepping outside. He didn't turn. She was 10 years old. Same age as my sister was when she died. The confession hung in the air between them. Olivia moved closer, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the railing. "You saved her," she said gently. "This time?" His voice was rough. "But I couldn't save my sister. Congenital heart defect. I was 15, helpless, useless. I became a surgeon because I never wanted to feel that powerless again." Understanding bloomed in Olivia's chest. This was why he controlled everything, why he kept emotion at arm's length. He'd learned that feeling meant hurting, and he'd built walls so high that nothing could penetrate them. "You can't save everyone," Olivia said, placing her hand over his on the railing. "But you saved that little girl today. You gave her parents their daughter back. That matters, Julian." He looked down at their hands, at the way her fingers covered his, small and warm against his cold skin. "How do you do it? How do you care so much and not break? Because caring is what makes us human. My father taught me that the heart isn't just an organ, it's where we keep our courage." She squeezed his hand. "You're allowed to feel things, you know. It doesn't make you weak." Julian turned to face her fully, and in his storm-gray eyes, she saw a war being waged between a lifetime of self-protection and a desperate need to connect. "I don't know how," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then let me teach you," Olivia said. The next morning, Olivia woke with a fever that turned her skin to fire and her thoughts to fog. She tried to push through it, to maintain the routine, but her body had other plans. Nina found her collapsed against the bathroom wall, shivering despite the heat radiating from her skin. Julian came home within the hour, despite having 3 surgeries scheduled. Olivia heard him arguing with someone on the phone as he climbed the stairs, his voice firm and unyielding. "Cancel them. All of them. I'll reschedule. This is more important." He appeared in her doorway, still in his white coat, his expression tight with concern. "Nina says, you're burning up." "I'm fine," Olivia protested weakly. "You have patience. Right now, you're my patient." He sat on the edge of her bed, pressing his palm to her forehead with a gentleness that surprised her. "And you're definitely not fine." What followed were the longest 24 hours of Olivia's life, but also some of the most revealing. Julian transformed from the distant stranger she'd married into someone she'd barely recognized. He brought her medicine and water, changed the cool cloths on her forehead, and sat beside her bed reading medical journals aloud when she couldn't sleep. In her fevered state, Olivia found the courage to ask the question that had haunted her since their wedding. "Why did you really agree to marry me?" Julian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly, "Because when your father talked about you, his whole face would light up. He said you were going to change the world. I wanted to see if he was right, and—" Olivia's voice was barely a whisper. Julian looked at her, really looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. "He was right," Julian said. "You're already changing mine." As Olivia drifted toward sleep, she felt Julian's fingers gently brush the hair from her forehead. A gesture so tender it brought tears to her eyes. The walls around his heart were beginning to crumble, and she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this marriage of convenience was becoming something neither of them had planned for, something real. The Grand Medical Symposium was the kind of event where reputations were built and legends were made. Olivia had never attended anything so prestigious, and as she stood in the hotel ballroom surrounded by the world's leading physicians, she felt both exhilarated and terrified. She'd chosen a deep, burgundy dress that Nina had insisted made her look sophisticated and confident. Even if she didn't quite feel it yet, Julian was in his element here, commanding attention without effort as he delivered the keynote address on innovative cardiac procedures. Watching him on stage, Olivia felt a strange flutter in her chest. He was magnetic when he spoke about his work, his usual reserve transforming into passionate intensity. This was the man her father had trusted with her future. She was beginning to understand why. After his presentation, they mingled in the reception hall. Julian stayed close to her side, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back. A gesture that felt both protective and possessive. Olivia told herself it was just for appearances, but the warmth of his touch sent shivers down her spine. "Dr. Ashford, brilliant as always," said a voice behind them. They turned to find Dr. Thomas Whitmore, a handsome physician around Olivia's age, with an easy smile and charming demeanor. "And you must be the new Mrs. Ashford." "Thomas Whitmore, pediatric cardiology fellow, Olivia Bennett," she said, shaking his hand. "Well, Olivia Ashford now, I suppose." "Still getting used to it. Medical student, right?" "I heard you're in your final year." Thomas's attention was entirely focused on her, and his interest was unmistakably more than professional. "Perhaps we could discuss research opportunities. I'm always looking for promising students to mentor." Olivia felt Julian stiffen beside her. His hand pressed more firmly against her back, and when she glanced at him, she saw something dangerous flickering in his gray eyes. "My wife has all the mentorship she needs," Julian said, his voice perfectly polite but edged with steel. "If you'll excuse us, Dr. Whitmore." As they walked away, Olivia could feel the tension radiating from Julian. "That was rude," she said quietly. "That was necessary," Julian replied. "Thomas Whitmore has a reputation for being overly friendly with female students. I can handle myself, Julian." He stopped walking, turning to face her with an intensity that made her heart race. "I know you can. But I didn't like the way he was looking at you. And how was he looking at me?" Julian's jaw clenched. "Like you weren't married. Like you were available." The possessiveness in his tone sent a thrill through Olivia that she didn't want to examine too closely. "We're not really married, though, are we?" "Not in the way that matters." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Julian's eyes searched hers, and she saw something raw and vulnerable break through his carefully maintained control. "Aren't we?" he asked softly. Before Olivia could respond, his phone buzzed urgently. The emergency room. A trauma case requiring immediate surgery. A young man, severe cardiac injury, minutes from death. Julian's expression shifted instantly to professional focus. "I have to go. I'm coming with you," Olivia said. "Olivia, you don't have to. I'm coming," she insisted. The surgery took 6 hours. Olivia watched from the observation gallery as Julian worked with the precision and artistry that had made him legendary. His hands moved with absolute confidence, every decision swift and sure. She'd seen surgeons work before, had observed countless procedures with her father, but watching Julian was different. This was a man fighting death itself, refusing to lose, pouring everything he had into saving a stranger's life. When he finally emerged from the OR, exhausted but victorious, Olivia was waiting. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him, forgetting about sterile protocols and professional boundaries. Julian stiffened for a moment, then his arms came around her. Holding her tight, "You are amazing," she whispered against his chest. "The patient was lucky," Julian said, but she could hear the emotion in his voice. "He'll live because of what you did today. Don't diminish that." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet hospital corridor, and Olivia realized that something fundamental had shifted between them. This wasn't the arrangement her father had planned anymore. This was something neither of them had expected, but both were beginning to need. Later that night, back at the penthouse, they sat together on the balcony under a blanket of stars. Julian had poured them each a glass of wine, and the silence between them was comfortable now, filled with understanding rather than awkwardness. "Can I ask you something?" Olivia said finally. "Anything. Why did you become so closed off? I know about your sister, but there's more, isn't there?" Julian was quiet for a long time, staring out at the city lights. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with old pain. "After my sister died, my mother couldn't look at me without seeing what she'd lost. My father buried himself in work. I learned that emotions were dangerous, that caring led to unbearable pain, so I stopped caring. I focused on perfection, on control, on saving others since I couldn't save her. That's not living, Julian, Olivia said gently. That's just surviving, I know. He turned to look at her, and in his eyes, she saw fear and hope warring for dominance. But then you came into my life, bringing your warmth and your impossible optimism. And suddenly surviving doesn't feel like enough anymore. What are you saying? Julian reached out, cupping her face with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with tears. I'm saying that this marriage was supposed to be temporary. A transaction. But somewhere between your terrible pancakes and the way you look at me like I'm worth saving, it became real for me. You became real, Julian, she whispered. I'm falling for you, Olivia. I've been falling for you since the day you brought warmth into my cold kitchen. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this, how to be what you need. Olivia leaned into his touch, her own hand covering his. You don't have to be anything other than who you are. You just have to let me in. Let yourself feel. Let yourself be happy. What if I hurt you? What if I'm too broken? Then we'll fix each other, Olivia said simply. That's what love does, Julian. It heals. The word love hung between them, beautiful and terrifying and absolutely true. Julian pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. I don't deserve you, he murmured. Lucky for you, I don't care about what you deserve. I care about what you feel. When Julian kissed her, it was with the desperation of a man who'd been drowning, finally finding air. Olivia melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair as years of loneliness and fear dissolved between them. This was what her father had known, what he'd hoped for when he'd written that impossible condition into his will. Not just a marriage of convenience, but a meeting of two souls who needed each other's light to chase away their darkness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Julian smiled. A real smile that transformed his entire face and made Olivia's heart soar. So what happens now? She asked. Julian pulled her against his chest, wrapping his arms around her. Now we stop pretending this is temporary. Now we build something real together. Now we let ourselves be happy. As Olivia listened to the steady beat of Julian's heart beneath her ear, she realized that sometimes the best prescriptions aren't written in medical books. Sometimes healing requires nothing more than the courage to open your heart and let someone else in. And sometimes the most brilliant surgeons need to remember that the heart they should focus on healing first is their own. Their story wasn't over. It was just beginning. But now they would write it together, two hearts beating as one, proving that love is the most powerful medicine of all.